Freelancers, small business owners, consultants, and solopreneurs. Some people are just drawn to working for themselves. I'm Owen Roth. In this show, I have conversations with self-employed folks about their career journeys. Welcome to the Bossless Path podcast. And here we go. Today I'm joined by JD Roth, founder and editor of Get Rich Slowly, an online financial independence community. And he's currently got one foot in retirement. Thanks for joining me, JD.
Thanks for having me, Owen.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't butcher your title there too much.
No, it's all good. It's close.
Okay, well, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I also want to put out there to viewers and listeners, we have no relation, actually, even though we share the same last name.
Right.
Yeah.
It can completely separate line of Roths.
Right,
No overlap at all.
Yeah, so I didn't just poach a relative of mine to interview. Let's start with what you did most recently. Like I said, you got one foot in retirement. Is that correct?
Yeah. What I try to tell people is that I'm trying to be retired. And by that, I mean that I'm doing my best to leave the online world where I've been writing about personal finance and financial independence and early retirement. I've been doing that for about 15 years. I don't have to do it anymore. But, there's this societal expectation that we be productive, and that's really strongly embedded in me. Mm-hmm. And so to try to be retired and choose to do things that aren't productive in society's view is very difficult.
Yeah, well, especially for people who are wired like yourself.
Yeah.
But you seem to be having some success. We were just chatting before the cameras were rolling about your watercoloring class you're taking.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm going back to grade school is what it's like, because I'm taking a watercolor class, and I've had 2 sessions, and just a raw beginner. And it is kind of fun. It's like taking art in grade school where you get the finger paints and you do it for the first time and make a mess and you don't really know what you're doing, but it's fun anyway.
Well, that's awesome. Well, can you tell us a little bit about what you are retiring out of? Sure.
So for the past almost 18 years, I've run a website called GetRichSlowly.org. And Get Rich Slowly started out as a way for me to document my own journey out of debt. So I graduated from college. It's kind of hard to know how far back to go. I'll start at the very beginning, but be brief. My parents were no good with money. They didn't grow up with parents who knew how to manage money, so they didn't know how to manage money, so they didn't teach their children how to manage money. Mm-hmm. So I grew up, went to college, graduated with already a credit card habit. This is back in 1991, and I was already spending on a credit card, and just got deeper and deeper in debt the further I got into adulthood, consumer debt. Mm-hmm. So that by 2004, I had over $35,000 in consumer debt. And now 2004 seems like so long ago. It's almost 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It seemed like a whole lot of money back then. And it was. And I didn't know what to do. And so some friends saw that I was struggling, 2 different sets of friends, and they recommended that I read a couple of books. One was Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. Mm-hmm. The other was Your Money or Your Life by Joe Dominguez and Vicki Robin. I read both books. And then I started going to the public library and borrowing more books about money and just reading them. And I thought I saw this common thread through all of the books. And that thread was that there's no reliable way to get rich quickly, but there are reliable ways to get rich slowly. Mm-hmm. So I've always been a writer. I process my thoughts and my feelings through writing. And I had a blog I've been blogging since before blog was a word. So I wrote this article for my personal blog called Get Rich Slowly. That was what the name of the article was.
Okay.
And I published this in 2005. It went the 2005 version of viral. And I thought, maybe there's an opportunity here to start a personal finance website. Maybe I could start a personal finance blog. I thought I'd be the first one on the internet.
Yeah.
I didn't know there were already dozens. So I started writing GetRichSlowly.org in April of 2006. And like I say, it was just a way for me to document my own journey with personal finance. I'd read articles or books and then kind of encapsulate what I thought I was reading, what I was learning.
Almost like a book report.
Yeah. It was very much like a book report. Yeah. And little did I know I thought I was alone, struggling with money. But no. Many people struggle with money. So
It's the reason there's so many books on it.
yes. And so I was very fortunate to build an online community very quickly. And the site grew, and it eventually moved from being about getting out of debt and learning how to manage money. As I learned how to manage money, it evolved into being more about financial independence and early retirement. And those topics over the past decade have become very hot in online communities. They're very popular topics, I guess I would say.
Yeah, FI is an acronym you hear, like financial independence, or FIRE, financial independence, retire early.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so Get Rich Slowly evolved into that. And I was very fortunate. I was able to make quite a bit of money with the website, so that now, without intending to, I did get rich kind of quickly. Not what I set out to do at all. I had no idea that I would make a lot of money doing that. I didn't have any idea that this would end up being a career. But writing online, speaking, it became a career for me, writing about money. And now I've been doing it so long, I'm just kind of burned out on it,
Sure.
And so I'm ready to move on, and I'm in the fortunate position that I can do things like try to be retired and spend my time walking the dog, taking watercolor classes, and so on.
You just kind of happen to have success in doing what you were writing about not being possible.
I always say that I'm an accidental personal finance expert, because a lot of people, I don't want to come off pretending that I'm something that I'm not, because most financial experts, they have degrees, they've spent a lot of time taking classes. For me, everything I know is experiential, and reading books. But it's a school of hard knocks, and I don't want to pretend like I have any kind of financial accreditation when I don't.
Formal education.
Not at all.
Gotcha. Okay. You kind of already teased it about like where you started, at least getting into the online space. Would you mind sharing like what your working career was like during this while you're building up the website?
I was a very poor planner, I would say. I went to college. When I entered college, I thought I was going to be a religion major. I thought I was going to graduate and be a youth pastor. That's not how things ended up. I ended up being a psychology major of all things. And I graduated with this psychology degree in 1991, but no plans for how to use it. And so I did something I swore I would never do. I went to work for my dad. My dad at the time owned a small business manufacturing corrugated packaging, so like shipping containers, that kind of thing.
Okay, boxes and stuff.
Yeah, custom boxes. And he needed a salesman. He had been the only salesman for the business, but the business had been growing. He needed somebody to do it. I did not want to work for him, but my poor planning didn't give me any other choice. I had no other option.
Gotcha.
So I went to work for my dad.
If I can interrupt real quick, is this a business that he had when you were growing up as a kid?
He started it in 1985. So he started it when I was in high school.
Okay.
And we worked. We really, this is a part of why I didn't want to do it, is we were very resentful of it, because he was trying to build this business literally in our garage. But to do that, he needed us to help after school. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to go hang out with our friends. And we come home and he said, "No, we got to make some boxes." And
I can see why you wouldn't want to go work for him formally.
Well, and my dad and I at the time had a pretty rocky relationship. So anyway, Dad passed away in 1995. So my two brothers and I and one of our cousins, we took over the business. And so for that was 95, and I quit in 2008 to work at Get Rich Slowly full time. So for the next 13 years, I was the sales department for the box factory, basically.
Okay. And were you a part owner with your family members?
Yeah, but the ownership it still hasn't amounted to anything after all this time. I'm 10% owner. It doesn't mean a thing. We don't get money because of it. So
yeah.
We don't take any money out.
I was just asking because I was curious what your involvement was outside of sales, but it sounds like you each kind of had your own area of expertise within the business.
We did.
Yeah. You had accrued debt. It's personal debt within that period of time, and you now find yourself working in this business with other family members, formerly your father. And then,
Yeah, and I didn't like it. And so a lot of my time was spent in the office, and this is back in the relatively early days of the internet. And like I say, I was blogging before blog was even a word. So I would spend a lot of extra time in the office. Instead of focusing on my work, I'd be blogging in secret. And it wasn't that secret. I mean, my brothers and cousin knew. They weren't happy about it.
just because it was taken away from your productivity.
They had every right to not be happy. I don't want to pretend. Yeah.
Sure.
And I was able to do that in the spare time while I was working at the box factory. And I would go home and do it too, do the blogging. And after I founded Get Rich Slowly in 2006, that very quickly became a business. Get Rich Slowly became a business. So that within a year, I remember it was July of 2007, so only like 15 months into it, I had already replaced my day job as far as income was concerned. And
That's pretty cool.
I didn't set out to do it. I did not set out to make money with the blog. I thought maybe I'd make $50, $100 a month to help pay off my debt. I didn't realize that I'd quickly be making thousands of dollars. So seeing how quickly I built that and recognizing the upside, I decided, and understanding that I was not carrying my share of the weight at the box factory, I said, okay, I'm out of here. And so I quit in March of 2008 to just blog full time. And
Gotcha.
I haven't had a real job since then.
Okay. It's a decent stretch of time to
Yeah, I know.
Self-employed, yeah.
Yeah.
You said you started making money quite quickly and enough to support yourself. How are you generating that income?
In those early days, it was purely through on-site ads, and it was purely through Google ads. I don't know anymore how effective Google ads are, but back then, because my site had grown so quickly, and because personal finance lends itself to lucrative ads.
Ads on your website.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
The things that get advertised tend to pay well to the person hosting the ads, I guess. So for me. And again, this is all unintentional. I just stumbled into this purely by chance. And then, so it started, I was making a few $1,000s a month through the Google ads. Then a friend of mine, a colleague, I guess, I'd started to meet and get to know other personal finance bloggers. Somebody said, hey, JD, why don't you have ads for savings accounts on your site? I'm like, I didn't know you could do ads for savings accounts. He's like, yeah, it's just like Amazon. They have affiliate programs. So you have sign-up links for different savings accounts, different banks, and they'll pay you a sign-up fee, like $10 for somebody who opens a savings account, or $20.
Gotcha.
And I said, all right, I'll do that. And he said, you should, because you are the top result on Google for savings account.
Wow.
I said, I am. I said, all right, whatever. I had no idea what all the implications were. So I put in these affiliate links for savings accounts, and boom, the income went up by an order of magnitude from a few thousand a month to a few tens of thousands of dollars a month.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, it was very shocking to me because that's totally outside my frame of reference.
Yeah.
It, like I say, it quickly became a method. I was writing about getting rich slowly, and here I was all of a sudden getting rich quickly.
Living a lie.
Well, no, I was public about what was going on, but he's like,
just messing with you.
Yeah, it was accidental. It was unintentional.
Yeah.
A lot of people are very methodical, especially business owners. They're methodical about how they go about starting their business and what they're aiming for. They write out business plans, all this stuff. Not me. I was just doing, there's a phrase, do what you love and the money will follow. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. But in my case, it happened to work out. That's exactly what happened. I was doing what I love. I was writing about money, helping other people. And I managed to make some money doing it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. You did say you're not much of a planner, so.
Yeah. I never have been, never will be.
Yeah.
I got to just accept that about myself.
Well, that's all right. Maybe walk us through what happened with the website. Did it grow? It sounds like you're still involved.
Yeah, I've kind of glossed over some stuff here. So the website grew very quickly. Obviously, it was making a lot of money. And then a couple of things were happening in my personal life. after 3 years, the website had grown so quickly that I found it overwhelming. Because remember, I didn't start to like build an audience. This is more like a private journal about me and my financial journey.
Right.
And suddenly I have more than 1 million readers per month. I'm like, it felt like pressure. It was nobody else was giving me the pressure. It was me putting pressure on myself. And I understand that, but it was still pressure.
Of course.
In some ways, it was worse than having pressure from outside.
Yeah. It's psychologically from outside, but it's really internal pressure.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's that. My best friend died. I was unhappy with my marriage. There are all these things going on. And I decided, I don't want to do this anymore. And so in January of 2009, I got an email from somebody offering to buy Get Rich Slowly from me. And I had received these kind of emails previously, and I just kind of ignored them. I'm like, whatever. Mm-hmm. But in January of 2009, I was in the right place, the right headspace to respond. And so I did. I was like, okay, what will you give me? And the guy wrote back and he said, $5,000. I laughed. Ha, 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 ha.
You're like, I make that in a month or less.
Yeah, less than a week, I can make that much money. But then another email came in the week later, and I wrote back, what will you give me? And they said, we don't know. We have to see your financial statements. And I'm like, oh, that sounds a little dodgy. But it turns out I contacted my attorney. I contacted my accountant. They're like, no. Anybody seriously wanting to purchase a business is going to want to see your financial statements. I'm like, okay. Mm-hmm. So I gave them my financial statements, and they said, okay, we're going to look at that. We'll get back to you in a week or two. And during that week or two, I decided, I'm going to do some research myself. Let me take this seriously. Instead of just like randomly fielding emails, let me see what's going on. Right. So I contacted a few other people that I found online that had sold websites and talked to them about their experiences. Mm-hmm. And then they recommended I talk to an investment banker. And I'm like, investment banker? I don't know what that is. But I contacted an investment banker, and they walked me through it. And they said, we'll give you some free advice here. They gave me some advice. They were great. They were absolutely great. And they said, we're not going to charge you for that, but we understand that you've got an offer in the works here, but we would like to shop your site around while you're waiting for the offer. I was like, okay, whatever.
Almost like a sales agent type?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they were doing. Huh. So while company A was trying to figure out what they wanted to offer for the website, the investment bankers were shopping me around to companies B, C, and D.
Yeah. And
little did I know it, but company E over here was interested all the time, but that's a totally other story. The short version is company A, the company that had emailed me.
Initial,
back,
yeah.
Yeah. And they came back and said, okay, here's our offer. And it was much more than I expected. My wife and I had sat down and talked, okay, how much would we need in order to sell the website? And they came back at double that. And I said, okay, let me think about it. And then the investment bankers came back with another offer that was 50% more than the first offer. And
wow.
So I went with that second offer.
Yeah. Wow.
And so this is I know I'm making this story long.
No, this is great.
I ended up selling the website in 2009.
Okay, so really just a few years after you started.
Less than 3 years after I started.
In those very early days, that first year, were you thinking, oh, I will build this to sell? Or is it just because you got in that mindset of...
At no point did I ever think I'm building this to sell. At no point did I have any sort of planning or calculation behind anything I did. So I don't want to make it ever sound like I had planning or calculation because I didn't.
Yeah.
It was all just happenstance, which is both good and bad, right?
Sure.
So as part of the sales agreement, they offered me X amount if I would stay around for 3 years and act as editor. And I said, no, I want to get out of here completely. I want out of here completely. And they went back to the drawing board. And so they offered me 30% less, and I could just walk away. And I said, okay, I'm going to take that 30% less and walk away. Mm-hmm. And then here's something that's really dumb. I stuck around for 3 years anyhow, working for free because I could not tear myself away. I felt so attached to this business, so attached to the website and the community that I felt like I couldn't walk away because I would be betraying my audience somehow. Now I don't feel that way, but back then, that's how I felt. And so
Yeah.
I ended up, not only did I sell the website for 30% less than I should have because I stuck around for 3 years anyway, but then I worked for free. I didn't even take payment from them.
Oh man. So they're probably just thinking like, okay, he has the exit door. He's been paid, but he's still here. I guess we just won't say anything because he's still doing work.
I think that's essentially how it worked.
Yeah.
But then eventually in 2012, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And I did walk away then. And so for a few years, I was out of there. But then I decided, I don't like not doing it. I spent 3 years basically retired at a very young age. I sold the site when I was 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 3 years getting fit, pursuing hobbies, helping friends with their businesses, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I decided I'd like to get back into personal finance. So I started a different personal finance site.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2017, the company that had purchased the site from me approached me and said, we're done. We're going to divest ourselves of our personal finance websites. If you want it, you can buy it back for a much smaller amount than I paid for it.
Oh, really?
I can't give exact numbers.
Yeah, we don't need numbers, but yeah, interesting. Do you have any idea of why they would sell it for such a low price?
When I sold it to them, the site was still number 1 or 2 for the term savings account. So they could make plenty of money. And I had never advertised credit cards on the site because I was, morally opposed. You could say that, I guess. At the time, I was morally opposed to credit cards. Now I view them as a tool, and I understand like a chainsaw that credit cards can be used wisely, or they can cut off your metaphorical leg, your financial leg, if you're not careful. And so I'm not as opposed to credit cards. But back then I was. And so the company that bought the site from me put credit card ads on the site. They were able to make a lot of money, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And but by 2017, the site wasn't making as much money, and the audience had dwindled. When I sold it, it was like 1.2 million visitors a month. Mm-hmm. And when I bought it back, it was like 50,000 a month.
Oh, wow. Do you think that was a byproduct of just like the financial climate, or was it or maybe like just the popularity of those type of sites?
It's partly the popularity. It wasn't the financial climate. I think it was popularity of those types of sites, but also a large part of the site had been me and my voice. Mm. And when that vanished, a lot of the audience left. Gotcha. And also when I ran the site, it was very clearly amateurish. I kept it deliberately amateurish. I did not go for high design. I kept it as personal as possible, I guess.
Okay.
And I did not use a lot of ads. Whereas then the company who bought it made it very polished, and they slapped on a ton of ads.
Yeah, they're trying to squeeze that lemon to get.
That's exactly the analogy. And they squeeze it until all the juice was gone, and then like, here, JD, you want the lemon peel?
Yeah, the corpse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did. So
because it sounds like you were desiring that. You missed that community. I
missed the community, and as part of the sales agreement, I gave up the rights to the material that I had written. And fundamentally, Owen, I am a writer. That's what I am, is a writer.
Okay.
And I wanted the rights to my material. And so when I think about it, that's what I was paying for when I bought the site back, is I was actually paying to recover the rights to my writing.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't do it again.
The buyback or the
sale. Yeah, the buyback. If I could go back to 2017 knowing what I know now, I would not repurchase the site. I would be like, no, it's fine.
Well, wait, why is that?
The reason that I'm right now trying to be semi-retired or trying to be fully retired is my heart just isn't in it. I've spent 6-7 years trying to recover the same energy and enthusiasm I had for Get Rich Slowly when I started it. Mm-hmm. And I've written some great stuff in the past few years. I don't want to put myself down, but I just don't have the enthusiasm. I have zero interest in the business side of running a website or a business online. Mm-hmm. As I've made it very clear, I fell into this by accident and was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't want to just sit there and it takes work to run a website, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to sit there and make nothing for all this effort. Mm-hmm. I'd rather, if I'm going to make nothing, I'd rather
walk my dog and take watercolor classes.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the community element? What goes into the running of the website? I know you're writing posts. Is there a forum?
There was originally there was a forum.
When you started it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they kept it for a little bit. And then at some point in the mid 2000 teens, they killed it. The community really is reading the comments from the readers, both on the website, Facebook, wherever it happens to be.
Right.
Fielding email. Initially, Get Rich Slowly was about me, right? In 2006, it was all about me.
Your journey, yeah.
Yeah. But by 2007, I was making it about the community. So people would write in with questions. I ended up with 2 regular features. On Friday, we had Ask the Readers. Readers would write in with their financial questions. I would give them my answer. They'd ask like, I want to buy a car, but I don't know. I'm making this amount of money and I have this old car and I don't know what I should do with the car. And so I would give my response, what I think, and then I would turn it to my audience and say, okay, audience, what do you think? What's your advice to this particular question?
I see.
And we'd have a couple hundred responses. And it was just a fun way to build community that way. And then on Sundays, I would have reader stories. And this was an opportunity for any reader who wanted to just submit their financial story. It could be about buying a car. It could be about getting a divorce. It could be about anything financial related. And that was an opportunity for people to come together and talk and be a community.
Yeah, you can see what other people are,
Yeah.
their journeys and their struggles and what successes and what have you.
And another way I think I built community, or at least the way I built an audience, is I'm very public about who I am. I've never been anonymous online. I've always been very public about who I am and what I do. And I don't lie. I mean, I tell the good and I tell the bad. And I don't try to pretend like I'm somehow smarter about money than other people. I don't try to pretend that I have credentials that I don't. I'm JD, an average guy trying to figure this stuff out. And here's what I've learned. And here's what I think is the right way to manage money. What do you guys think? And so I think that helped really build the audience in the community.
I mean, that's a powerful way to connect to people is being genuine because
Exactly.
it's more rare than it should be online. It's easy to hide behind the anonymous wall of the internet, and you can.
People don't want to show their warts.
Right. Yeah.
And everyone has blind spots and problem areas, and I have not been afraid to share those. And some people are. They want to look perfect online. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah. Very, very true. Myself included, obviously.
You're not perfect?
Oh, God, no. No. Anyone who's listening to this podcast can see that. So you got the website back, and then have you just been doing things as slowly reverting it to how the website was before this company that had purchased it?
Yeah.
Changes?
So I bought it back in 2017, and I immediately tried to kind of recapture or rekindle the old fire or I tried to make it what it was before.
Yeah.
But it had been nearly 10 years since I owned the site, and the internet changes a lot in 10 years, and it had changed a lot.
Yeah.
And it moved to social media. It had moved to video. There were fewer people reading blogs. The people reading blogs were more sophisticated. I was in a different place. When I started the site, I was in debt, and I was writing about the personal finance fundamentals.
Right.
But by 2017, I was flirting with early retirement. I mean, the reality was I was early retired. So my interests were different. And that meant Get Rich Slowly's audience had to be different too, because I'm going to write about the things that interest me. So
Of course.
writing about getting out of debt was no longer authentic or genuine. And my audience had moved beyond that too. The people who had started the journey with me, they too had been able to invest and build wealth.
Right.
Most of them hadn't gotten lucky like I had and fallen into a windfall. But many had been able to build wealth and were approaching early retirement. So that's what I started writing about. And then I recognized that I was deficient in the online marketing, the social media, the search engine optimization, and that kind of thing. So I brought in one of my colleagues as a business partner, and
we gave it a go he came out in 2018, so we gave it a go for 4 or 5 years. And my heart just wasn't in it. And so I said, hey, Tom, you want to buy the site from me? And he said, sure. And so that's where we are right now. He's buying me out. Technically, I'm still writing for the site, but the reality is we haven't published anything in 6 months. And
that's probably a long time.
yes, it's a transition. Tom's going to do something different with the site. I've been upfront with my audience. Hey, I've sold it again. I'm out for real this time. Come read my personal site. I have a personal website where I write about whatever I want.
Uh-huh.
And many of my existing audience members want to read whatever I write, and I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been reading my random thoughts about random things.
Okay. The non-financial side of JD. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So you're in the process of fully stepping away, probably the last time stepping away from Get Rich Slowly.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I'm curious on when you were in it, in these recent years since you purchased it back, what would your day-to-day look like, and like how often were you writing? It sounds like you said Fridays and Sundays. Was that was prior though?
That was prior.
And then
before I sold it the first time, I had a much more regular routine. I had an office. I would go to the office. I would write. And I should mention that I've had various side projects along the way.
Oh, like what?
So I wrote a book that came out in 2010, I think it was, called Your Money, The Missing Manual. And then
Great title.
In 2021, it must have been 2021 because we recorded it right at the height of COVID. So Audible, the audiobooks company, and the Great Courses, which is a company that provides like college lectures for people to watch or listen to. You can buy them and stuff. Mm-hmm. They approached me and said, hey, we're starting this series of courses that are not about like medieval history and stuff, but just like personal finance. Do you want to do one on financial independence and early retirement? I said, sure. And so I wrote that and recorded that, and it's on Audible. It's free if you're an Audible member, I guess. But yeah, I spent a lot of time putting that together. And to me, that course on Audible that I did, that is like the best encapsulation of everything that I have learned about personal finance. And it was when I finished that, actually, I spent 6 months getting that done, and I spat it out. And I'm like, you know what? That's my life's work right there. I've taken everything I've learned about personal finance over the 15 years that I've been doing this, and it's all right there. What more is there to do?
Yeah.
So the day-to-day experience since I repurchased it, part of the problem is that I haven't had a routine. There's been no routine. And
that's a detriment to you?
Yeah, I know a lot of small business owners are self-directed, right? They have to be.
Right.
And for me, I actually thrive better when somebody's imposing external limitations or expectations on me, I guess. So for example, school. I thrive in an educational environment because I know what is expected of me. Somebody else is setting the parameters of what needs to get done. Mm-hmm. And so I excel. But when it comes time for me to do stuff myself, it's more difficult. And so in some way, I'm like the opposite of most entrepreneurs. And yet at the same time, I love doing business stuff.
Yeah, I can relate strongly with.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah, that entire statement. Yeah. Feel like and I've been employed most of my life. It was only in these recent times that I've tried full-time self-employment. But yeah, I feel like I'm really sometimes enjoy, but I'm really good at being an employee and working under, given deadlines, guidelines. But then when I'm doing what I'm doing now and trying to figure it out on my own, it's just like things don't get as done because I'm spread too thin. And sometimes if the motivation isn't there, like I'm just like, well, it's okay if it doesn't get done because I don't have to answer to anyone.
Exactly. Yeah. A couple responses to that. One is, for the past 5 years, I've been saying that I need to hire somebody to tell me what to do. It's like, I want to be the boss, but I want to have somebody that's my employee that says, JD, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do that. And I don't actually know what you call it. I don't know what position I'm looking for there. But I feel like that kind of person would have been very helpful and might have helped me do more with Get Rich Slowly. And the second thing is I talked with my girlfriend recently. She was asking about like, why can't you be self-directed? And I know why it is.
Why is that?
I have ADHD. It's diagnosed. I take medication for it.
Mm.
And it makes it very difficult for me to focus and pick my own direction. I'm just scattered. I'm all over the place.
Gotcha.
But in a school environment, I know a lot of ADHD people struggled in school, but I didn't. For me, it's like, okay, I know where my attention needs to be focused. And so I excelled.
Very interesting. Yeah, that is kind of against what my common thinking would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's even more interesting that you've found yourself with the career that you've had, because it sounds like a lot of it has been outside of that structured environment.
I know.
Do you think you'll still continue to write, like at least on the personal side? You said you have a personal blog. It sounds like you enjoy that. Is that something you want to continue to do even after you've sold the website and let the financial writing go?
Yeah. I have no shortage of ideas. I have physical files full of ideas for writing,
Yeah.
whether it's articles or books or whatever. And I have digital files just full of writing stuff, writing ideas. So I have no shortage of things that I would like to write about. And I have all sorts of projects that I think of too. Like one thing that I would really like to do is create, I call it an encyclopedia of personal finance, an online encyclopedia of personal finance, basically like Wikipedia but for money.
Yeah. Isn't there like Investopedia?
There is. And how I would set myself up, Investopedia is very much, they've got good information and I rely on them for my own research and I link to them a lot. But they're also very much for profit, and some of their stuff is, I want to be as neutral and unbiased as possible, I guess is what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
And I've been in the online communities enough to know that although people try to remain unclouded, they get clouded very quickly when big bucks come into the picture to offer to pay for advertising. And
yeah, I think that'd probably be hard to resist. Just
Yeah.
see a check with a huge number and
yeah, it's
it'll change most people's minds.
anyway. So I don't want to be dissing on Investopedia because it's a great site, but for me, this project, I would love to create this online encyclopedia of personal finance where it just gives has definitive articles about how to get out of debt or how to invest simply and easily. And it offers this advice without any ulterior motives, I guess.
Yeah. Not trying to funnel you into signing up for this or
Exactly.
or what have you.
But at the same time, that's work.
That's a lot of work.
I don't want to do work right now. I want to take some time to try to be retired.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm not putting any pressure on you.
No.
Just curious. So you have all this experience with websites. How did you educate yourself to build and design a website?
So I'm a nerd, and I've always been a nerd. And I grew up, even though we didn't have much money when I was a kid, my father somehow scraped together enough, because he was a nerd too. We had a very early Apple II computer, but there wasn't much software for computers back then. And even though Dad was willing to pay for a computer, he wasn't willing to pay for software. So if I wanted anything on that computer, I had to program it myself. So in fourth grade, I was teaching myself, it was only BASIC really, well, and some assembly language, I guess, but I was teaching myself to program computers even back then.
Wow.
So Get Rich Slowly really is kind of a result of all these different interests. My psychology degree, my crappy ability to handle money, my inability to handle money, my love of writing, my computer programming interest, it all just kind of came together. When the web was young, it was really a sweet spot for my nerdiness because I was already participating in online communities. They were bulletin board systems back then on your dial-up modem. It wasn't the internet, but then the internet came along with web browsing and email and FTP and Gopher and all these other things. And so it was just a natural fit for me. And, so it was the early days of web programming with HTML was very easy, and even early CSS, very easy. It just all came naturally.
Yeah.
Eventually, it got more complicated, and nowadays I'll still code my own website, but it's much more difficult. So anyway,
Okay.
all I'm saying is my natural nerd abilities and all my experience just kind of led me toward Get Rich Slowly.
Yeah.
Nothing I could have planned. And as we've talked about, I'm not much of a planner anyhow, but it just all kind of led me there.
Yeah. That's really impressive to me though, because I mean, I'm a self-teacher, but like one of the tools of self-teaching is the internet. So it's interesting to hear you like that you're able to self-teach before the internet really was a thing, and there probably wasn't as much material out there as far as books you could get or what have you. Especially
you would get books. I actually think it was easier because this is going to be a counterpoint, I guess. Now it's like we're bombarded with the paradox of choice. There's so much information out there.
Yeah.
It's hard to figure out what's quality, which source are you going to use. You got to sit there and really dig to find. Let's use my interest in watercolor as an example.
Mm-hmm.
There are dozens, if not hundreds, of YouTube channels about watercolor. Which one's the best? I don't know.
Yeah.
And but back in the day, if you only had 2 or 3 books in the bookstore about how to program a web page, well, you just pick one and go with it. And so it was, in some ways, it was easier to me.
That's interesting. I'm always curious, and I've asked my parents and other people who are, a few decades older than me of like, what was it like before the internet was like, I always ask, was it a simpler world? And that's probably not the right way to phrase that question, but it seems to me like, because I grew up with the internet. I'm in my 30s now. And like, so when you in 2005, 6, when you were, first launching your website, I was graduating high school. Mm-hmm. And like, I grew up with the internet. Like, I remember we had a dial-up modem, and I remember that first website experience, I was probably like 9 or 10 or something.
Yeah, that would be about right.
Yeah, and I made some of my own websites. They were like Nerf gun websites.
That's so
like
fun.
like writing reviews and like me and my friend were like really into modifying them and make them shoot. They basically make them dangerous weapons to kids. Yeah, there's really silly, but but there's a whole online community for that even in those early days. And but it's interesting since I've grown up with the internet. As I've become through my formal years, it's grown with me. But I didn't really get to experience that, time before the internet. So I'm always curious to hear from folks who are slightly older.
Old people.
I was going to say slightly older, who had some adult period prior to the internet. Was the world simpler in your point of view?
In a lot of ways it was. And I have a love-hate relationship with the internet. This is another reason that I'm kind of wanting to divorce myself from Get Rich Slowly, is I feel like the internet really held a lot of promise in the early days. And much of what the internet has become is great, but much of what it has become is not so great. In the early days, it was very much egalitarian, I would say. It was anybody could start a website, and plenty of people did. I started my personal finance site and so on. Nowadays, the internet is really dominated by corporate interest in a way, and I'm not dissing on that. I'm just observing that it's dominated by corporate interests in a way that it was not 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was very experimental, and let's use Fidelity as an example, the investment company. And I'm a Fidelity customer, and I love them. But to them, the web was just like, it's kind of a toy. It's kind of a toy.
Yeah.
Now, though, it's the primary focus for them. And this is true all over the world for all sorts of businesses. But yeah, it was simpler. I want to say that the primary source of knowledge for me was the public library. And I've always been a book person, so bookstores too, and owning books. But it was simpler in that we used to be much more focused on the world immediately around us, on our immediate neighbors, on our community, and so on. And the internet, for better or worse, has made it so that we are much less focused on our neighbors. I remember when I was an early homeowner in the mid-1990s, we knew all of our neighbors. And we would hang around with our friends, and you didn't go home at night and spend all this time online. There was nothing online to go spend time with.
Right.
And nowadays, I think it's just the internet makes it too easy to avoid real life in a way.
Mm-hmm. It's escapism.
Not just escapism, but I'm hedging here because I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Sure.
And I've done a lot of reading about social capital and the deterioration of community bonds and stuff, even pre-internet, because there was this very popular book called Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. I think it was published in 1997. And so it's essentially pre-internet was when he was writing it.
Right.
And he's bemoaning, it's called Bowling Alone because he's bemoaning the loss of bowling leagues and other community groups that bonded people together. So he was seeing social decay even before the internet. It's only been exacerbated over the past 20 years, 30 years.
Gotcha.
The communities and the neighborhoods aren't what they used to be.
Right.
That's a real tangent there.
No. I mean, it's in the vein of what I'm asking, essentially. Yeah. I noticed that. Like, even though I haven't really lived, in formative years prior to the internet, that I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've finally become someone who I see the very clear delineation between myself and the generation below me as adult, like, and they're adults, like that. That became more and more clear over the past few years, and it's a strange feeling to be like, oh, now I see what my parents and whatever were talking about those kids, and they don't understand the culture and stuff, and I mean.
Give it another 20 years, it becomes even weirder.
I can imagine.
So I remember those early days when I'm like, oh yeah, I'm feeling a little detached. And now you get to 54, society goes in directions, and all of a sudden, all this stuff that I was a very progressive college student. I mean, college students tend to be most of the time. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, my progressive views are considered not so progressive anymore. Mm. And so I will have conversations with younger people in their 20s, and they'll be saying, oh, you're just so old-fashioned, blah, blah, blah. And this is what I believe in. I tell them, I say, give it 30 years, and these things that you think are that you're so dialed in on now, you will have kids that are in their 20s telling you that you're old-fashioned and that you're behind the times. Yeah. And my parents used to say that kind of stuff to me, and I was like, whatever, no, I'm progressive. And I get it now.
Yeah.
It's change.
Yeah. All it takes is just to like we've been discussing, just you get that real world experience and just oh, yeah, people were telling me this, whether it was a person telling me or a book. Now I see, now I understand.
And what's interesting to me, Owen, and this is way off tangent, is it's impossible to predict what the changes are going to be. If you had told me 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that the issues now would be the issues that they are, I'd have been like, what? Mm-hmm. Why? This is just that's a random thing to make an issue, but nope. Yeah. These are what the issues are. So
yeah, unpredictable. Totally.
I have no idea what it's going to be 20 years from now.
I think about both that in terms of what you're just talking about, just general, what the future is going to be like. And then I also think about that. I remind myself that I don't know what my future will be like necessarily, because I know some people have they've got their plan. Where I'm at 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And I've never really had that. I guess another area of relatability outside of our last name and everything else we've talked about, but that lack of planning of I have looked at my life and been I would have never predicted that I would be making a podcast 10 years ago, because I hate being in front of camera and being recorded. So that was I couldn't have predicted that I would be doing this. And just I don't think I can accurately predict where I'll be in 20 years, whether career-wise or just in life. I'm just not that type of person. And also life throws you in different directions, and you have to make decisions, and then somehow you end up way over here, even if you might have had a plan.
Exactly. If you had told me I would be who I am today 20 years ago, I'd have been like, no, what? Yeah, none of that would have made any sense. Are you familiar with Daniel Gilbert?
No.
He's I I don't know whether he's a psychologist or an economist. I think he's at Harvard. He's someplace on the East Coast. He writes a lot about happiness, is what he writes about, in the pursuit of happiness. And he's got some really interesting online TED Talks and just lectures in general. And he writes a lot about how it's impossible. You can't predict what will make you happy in the future. It's just, you can't.
Right.
You have to make best guesses based on who you are today, but you've also got to be able to go with the flow because you don't know what's going to bring you joy and happiness and fulfillment in the future because you're going to change and evolve. But I will say it's interesting. I just went up to Canby yesterday and I met with some of my friends, and they've been friends since high school. And I look at many of the people that I was friends with in high school, not many, but this particular group. And for them, I think they can predict and could have predicted. They're pretty much doing what they would have told you they would be doing 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think they could tell you where they're going to be in 20 years, and I think they would be right. So it's not everybody, but...
No, I try to put that caveat in there for myself. Like,
Yeah.
I probably could plan, but yeah, I think, and I mean, that is partly why I'm talking to people like yourself on this show, is just because it seems like many people who have chosen that self-employment path, doesn't matter if it's making your own website and community and being a blogger, or like starting a business, a restaurant or something. Like, it seems like everyone who has fallen that bossless path is like someone who's kind of evolving, and like they're problem solvers and stuff, and everything that goes along with that. And some people do have more goal-oriented stuff, but I think everyone's got they're a little bit looser with like their plan than, say, someone who's like, I'm going to be a corporate lawyer. So there's law school is step A, and then B, C, D. Here's how we go. That's just a through line that I've noticed with self-employed people.
That's interesting. I've never tried to look for commonalities with self-employed. I sometimes, in a couple of weeks, I'll fly down for the annual financial blogging conference. Believe it or not, there's a financial blogging conference.
Okay.
And it's one of my favorite things every year. And a couple thousand of us get together, and I have tried to think about what are the commonalities for all of this. And there are definitely commonalities. And a lot of it is we want to do our own thing. We tend to be very independent. I don't know. Yeah, I love what you're doing. I think trying to figure out what are the similarities and where are the differences among entrepreneurs. I think it's a curious thing.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a clear answer. I mean, blanket statements are always dangerous, right? I feel like, all entrepreneurs are X, Y, Z. These are the three traits no matter what, because there's always exceptions.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that's something I commonly hear and see, is that, like, there's a level of, like you said, independence and just flexibility in what they're pursuing and they're going to do. Did you tell me why you picked psychology as a degree?
I did not tell you why I picked psychology as a degree, and I don't have an answer for you. I think it's because it was just easy at the time. So again, it's the lack of being self-directed. I didn't have anybody telling me, oh, you should pursue this degree for this reason. I had no examples in my own life of people who had gone to college, so I didn't know which degrees, I don't want to say were most profitable, because that's a mercenary way to go about college. I know people do that.
Sure.
But I didn't know what to study. So I chose psychology because I was interested in it and because it was easy. And you're a psychology major too.
Yeah. And
why did you choose psychology?
Quite similar reasons. I mean, at the time I was very goal oriented on being a filmmaker, and very self-taught in just most things. I like self-teaching, and I kind of chalked up film school as not necessary. And then fast forward to today, and I don't know if that's entirely true, but at the time I'm like, I can teach myself all this stuff. But my parents were very much of the mindset, you're going to go to school for something. We don't really care what. I think there probably was caveats to that. But anyways, yeah, I started off as a sociology major because that was just one of the interests I had. And then I switched over to psychology and got a minor in sociology and a minor in filmmaking. But yeah, psychology, like you, is just like, it wasn't, I think it was just like, it was just interesting to me. People are interesting. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing a podcast.
Right. And so I will say this, Owen.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a long time that I regretted getting a psychology degree.
Oh, is that right?
Because I was married. My wife had a chemistry degree and an education master's. And so she was a high school physics and chemistry teacher. And then she went to work in the crime lab for the state police. And most of our college friends they had chosen their degrees they had planned, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
As opposed to me. They didn't just fall into a degree.
Yeah.
You can tell I fell into get rich slowly. I fell into my degree. There's a large lack of planning in my life.
Sure.
And that used to bug me, but I've come to be at peace with that. I told you recently that I've been like reading about Taoism and stuff, and a big part of Taoism and Zen Buddhism, I think, is just accepting yourself for who you are and not trying to force yourself to be what society expects you to be or what you think society expects you to be.
Yeah.
And so I've become comfortable with that now. I'm like, okay, no, I don't need to be a planner. Other people can be planners because that works well for them. But I like living life without a lot of planning. It makes me happier and a much more richer, fulfilled person. But I was going to say that with the psychology major, even though it felt as if I wasn't making use of it, I had no way of knowing this. But eventually, once I started Get Rich Slowly, this degree that I had earned 15 years earlier played a huge role because what I was writing about, all these other financial experts with their credentials and their education, they know all the ins and outs of the tax system and how to invest and all the legalities.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know any of that, but I had a background in psychology and I had personally been deep in debt so that I could relate to it and I understood the psychology of being in debt.
Mm-hmm.
So that made me much better able to provide advice and to relate to people in my audience who were also struggling with debt. And my psychology degree became a huge part of my identity as a financial writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no way of knowing that, of course, back in 1991 because blogs didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I could never have imagined that money would become my focus.
When was that self-awareness that like you needed to be not focus on the external and the comparative is kind of what I felt like you were alluding to as far as like your friends who picked different degrees and paths?
You know, it wasn't until relatively recently, and I say that, and it's more like it was 10 years ago, what I realized is that who I am today is a result of all of the choices that I've made throughout my life, even the choices that I felt like were dumb at the time or even still think were dumb.
Yeah.
I would not be the man I am today if I hadn't made those choices. And I'm content and I'm happy with the man that I am today. And if that's the case, then I cannot regret these things that I've done or the things that have happened to me because they're what made me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I completely subscribe to that. That's something I think of all the time is just like, I don't know, it's easy to say I don't have regrets. It's hard to actually embody that. I try to, but because I think what you just said is completely true, that you're shaped. You're completely shaped by everything in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the failures, the successes, and I don't know if, you know, I've periods in my life where it's just like there wasn't much going on, I guess. But I'm like, well, that kind of informed me later to be like, oh, be a little bit more intentional with your time.
But when you're going through that, it feels crappy, right? You're like,
exactly.
Oh, all these stupid decisions I made. Look, that's how I got here, and now I'm wallowing in my misery. And yeah, I told you that I'm interested in the Taoism and the Zen Buddhism and stuff, and both are very much now oriented. They don't want you to be anxious about the future, and they don't want you to dwell on the past. They don't want you to linger on the mistakes you've made. They say things like, the past doesn't exist. Well, to me, obviously, the past does exist, but I get what they're trying to say.
Sure.
But there's this poem that I like. It's called Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And it's about Ulysses coming back from his adventures in the Trojan War and all that. And he comes home After all his adventures, 20 years lost at sea, the sirens, the cyclops, all this stuff. And he's sitting at home with his wife and his kid, and he's bored. And he's like, this sucks. I want to go back out there and do something more. I want to have another adventure. I want to get all my old companions. I'm old now, but maybe we can go sail away again. And one of the lines in the poem is, I am a part of all that's come before, or all I've seen before. I don't know the exact line.
Okay.
And I think about that all the time. I'm a part of all that's come before. And because it's so true. We are a sum of everything that's happened to us, everything we've done, everything we thought about.
Right.
And if you're pleased with where you are, you can't regret things. And if you don't like where you are, well, you still have the power to change that, right?
Right.
If you don't like where you are in this moment today, then it's up to you. It's your responsibility to like chart a new path or find a way ahead that will make you the person that you want to be, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like I'm preaching now, but
I mean, I'm setting you up, so yeah, it's yeah. I mean, that's very valuable, especially for someone who, well, it doesn't matter where you find yourself in your career, but for those who are self-employed or finding their own path, I think that's important to not beat yourself up, because like,
oh yeah,
there's from my little experience with entrepreneurship and those who I've talked to, it sounds like there's always those like low times. So you can't beat yourself up about them. It informs who you are.
Yeah, this is a great point, Owen. I think it's important not to let the downtimes drag you so deep. It's easier said than done, because I know that when things are going poorly, it's just easy to get all beat yourself up. But at the same time, to not let the highs get you so carried away that you think they're going to last forever. I think it's good to take a measured approach, to step back and be more even about both the highs and the lows, I guess.
Yeah. One thing I always practice is when I'm like in my normal everyday life, whatever that may be, like I'm just, like I'd like to play soccer and I'm out playing. And I now take a real like note of like how good that is, even if it's very basic. And just like the fact that I'm healthy enough and in a good enough position where I can like have free time to do that and be in good health to do that. That's like,
you're practicing gratitude is what you're doing.
Yeah, it's gratitude practice. Yeah. But really that isn't something someone could have told me about gratitude and how to practice it and why when I was younger. But really I wouldn't have been able to actually attune to that without experiences, all the like injuries I've had and like the down periods and, when I'm like too busy to do that or what have you, or just don't be in a space where I'm using soccer as a primary example here of like having the community to actually go find games and stuff. And it's like those times sucked.
Yeah.
So specifically the ones when I was injured. So then when I am out of that period, and even though I'm not like, playing professionally or anything, like I'm just like, oh, this is great. Like I need to appreciate this.
I think that's smart. It's funny that you bring up the soccer and the soccer injuries. So in 2002, 2003, I don't remember when, but I tore my ACL. I was playing goalie, and just for a pickup. Well, it wasn't a pickup league, but like a community rec league in Portland, the lowest possible league.
Yeah,
adult league, and it was on this uneven ground because we were playing in just parks around town, and just tore the ACL and ended up with an ACL replacement in this knee in 2004. And now it's 20 years later and it's starting to hurt. And I'm getting older. I'm 54.
Yeah.
And my knee, it really bugs me, especially going up and down stairs. And I think about my soccer injury every single day.
Oh, wow.
And at the same time, I'm never like, oh, doggone it, I hate that soccer injury. Instead, I'm like, yeah, that kind of sucks, but I am grateful that I can still get around, because I look at other people who have mobility issues and I can at least still get around, and I walk 5 miles every day. And yeah.
Yeah, that's super important to do. And I think it's easy, especially now, like in the digital age where like the social comparatives with social media just makes it that much more difficult, whether it's like someone's lifestyle or what have you, but I mean, it's all under the same umbrella of like, you can practice gratitude and appreciate what you have versus making those comparative benchmarks either to what you had or what someone else has, whether it's health, wealth, or what have you, lifestyle.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's like the most important thing, or one of the most important things to like have in your personal toolkit to just like, you know, make it through life happy. It's just like,
Just not compare yourself to others.
Be able to like be realistic and have gratitude for where you're at and what you have. And yeah, I think social comparison is an impossibility to dodge entirely. Like,
Sure, because we're human, and it's.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're intellectually, it sounds like you and I are in a similar place where intellectually we know we ought not compare ourselves to other people.
you're gonna do it.
And really, I should not compare myself to my past. Like 10 years ago, I was super, super fit. I was the peak fitness of my life 10 years ago. I was doing CrossFit, and I could do anything. And now I'm 10 years older. I don't exercise nearly as much. And I go to the gym, and I want to lift the same weights that I lifted 10 years ago when I was super fit. That is not happening. It is not happening. And it used to be that really got me down. And I've come to just, partly because I've been reading about Taoism and stuff, I've learned to just accept it. I'm like, no, this is where I am today, in this moment. This is how much I can lift. It's fine.
Yeah, just being okay with that.
Yeah.
I can relate to that too. I'm a little bit younger as far as chronological age, but yeah, I already see that in my own life. Well, I guess that brings me to if you were going to give advice to anyone who's considering a bossless career of any form or another, what would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, try it. I know so many people are afraid to do it. My two pieces of advice, they're almost contradictory. Okay, so the first one is try to have a safety net. So as a personal finance writer, I would say try to have some sort of backup savings before you plunge headfirst into the pool of entrepreneurship. But at the same time, don't be afraid to do it. This is similar advice I give to people who want to experiment with being retired early. So many people are afraid to pull the trigger because they think they need $2 million or $3 million or whatever the number is. And what they don't recognize is that even if you have only $500,000 saved, you still have a big cushion there that gives you the freedom. You're in a fortunate position where you can take some risks that other people couldn't. So if somebody wants to be an entrepreneur and they can create this cushion, and it doesn't have to be a huge cushion, that gives them the freedom then to take some risks and to try things. And I'm just as guilty as anyone else of being afraid to take risks, afraid to try new things. But I've also learned that it doesn't hurt to do it. It may be scary, but if you just dive in, you'll quickly learn whether it's the right thing for you or not. And if it's not, well, then you just get back out and you go back to whatever you were doing before, right? It's the downsides are pretty minimal, in my opinion.
That's great to hear. I'm actually living what you're talking about right now.
The fear?
Not the fear, the building the cushion, taking the dive, trying it out. Yeah. You're kind of retiring and you're moving away from your website, but do you want to share your personal blog? Is that something you'd like to put out there?
Sure. And if people want to go read about whatever I'm doing at the moment, my watercolors or walking the dog or no, I write about interesting stuff too. It's stuff I'm thinking about. It's at jdroth.com. And I just have a personal blog where I share random thoughts about random things.
Sure. And then you've got your book and then the Audible as well.
Yeah, the book at this point is outdated. It's 10 years old. It's about personal finance, so a lot of the advice. But the Audible thing, I had seen that the book got outdated. So when I created the Audible course, I deliberately made it so that it was evergreen, in that I don't have any specific advice in there that is going to get outdated. And that is called How to Achieve Financial Independence and Retire Early. And it's, like I say, it's the best summation of everything I've learned about personal finance over the past 15, 20 years.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, we'll link that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, JD, this has been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
All right. And there you have it. A very deep conversation, sometimes philosophical, with JD Roth. If you like this conversation and want to listen to similar ones, subscribe or follow the podcast. Until then, this has been the Bossless Path. Catch you next time.